Megan Williams settled into seat 12F of the crowded evening flight from Denver to Washington, D.C., pulling her gray hoodie a little tighter and tucking a few loose strands of hair under her baseball cap as the last of the boarding passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle, the soft hum of engines already filling the cabin with a steady background sound that reminded her of a heartbeat she had once known well. She chose the window seat on purpose, not only because she liked to watch the sky change colors as the sun dipped below the horizon, but also because it gave her a small corner of privacy in a world that often felt too loud and too curious. From the outside she looked like any other traveler heading to the nation's capital on a weekday evening, quiet, polite, and easy to overlook, but beneath the calm surface she carried years of memories that most people would never imagine, memories filled with roaring jet engines, sudden turns in high altitudes, and the fierce focus of someone who once commanded a machine faster than sound. Megan had been one of the best pilots in the United States Air Force, a name that instructors used to motivate younger flyers, a leader who had guided her squadron through missions that required both skill and courage. But life had changed quickly and without warning. A sudden knee injury during a training exercise had grounded her, and not long after that, an accident during a nighttime operation took the life of her closest friend and wing partner, Captain Laura Price, a loss that still pressed on her heart every time she closed her eyes. After those two blows, Megan decided to leave active duty, trading the endless open sky for a desk job at the Pentagon, where the days were filled with reports, briefings, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights instead of the thunder of engines. She told herself it was the right decision, that she had served with honor and it was time to move forward, yet every time she stepped onto a commercial flight as a passenger she felt the strange pull of the past, the uneasy feeling of being only a traveler when she had once been the one at the controls. As the plane prepared for takeoff she stared out at the runway lights glowing like tiny stars along the dark asphalt, feeling the familiar thrill of acceleration as the aircraft surged forward, but also a faint ache, a reminder of everything she had left behind. Around her the other passengers were busy with their own small worlds, businessmen typing on laptops, a young couple whispering excitedly about their weekend plans, a mother reading to her sleepy child, none of them aware that the woman in the corner seat had once guided fighter jets through dangerous skies on missions that few people would ever hear about. The attendants moved down the aisle checking seat belts, their smiles routine and practiced, and Megan gave a polite nod when they glanced her way, keeping her thoughts to herself. She wondered, as she often did, whether the calm life she had chosen would ever truly satisfy her, whether the part of her that loved the roar of engines and the sharp call of a radio transmission would ever grow quiet. For a brief moment she closed her eyes and imagined herself back in the cockpit, helmet secure, the night sky stretching out forever, and the quiet voice of Laura on the comm saying, "We've got this, Eagle One," using the call sign that only a handful of people had ever known. The memory was so clear she almost reached for the controls that were no longer there. Opening her eyes, she took a slow breath and reminded herself that tonight was just a simple flight across the country, nothing more. Yet deep inside, a small unshakable sense told her that the sky still had a way of calling her back, and that this journey, like so many before, might not stay ordinary for long. The flight had been smooth for more than an hour, the soft rhythm of engines and the quiet chatter of passengers blending into a gentle background sound that almost lulled Megan Williams into a rare sense of calm, yet a subtle shift in the atmosphere began to catch her attention long before anyone else noticed, a faint tension that only a trained pilot could feel, as if the aircraft itself was holding its breath while moving through the cold night air. Megan opened her eyes from a half-doze and looked around the cabin, her instincts sharpened by years of experience, and though the other travelers remained absorbed in their books, phones, and quiet conversations, she sensed something unusual in the slight change of the engine's tone, a minute difference in vibration that an ordinary passenger would never detect. A few moments later the captain's voice came over the speaker with professional calm, announcing that their landing into Washington might be delayed because of routine air traffic adjustments, words that sounded reassuring to most but carried a faint strain that Megan recognized at once, the careful choice of language a pilot uses when the truth is not yet ready to share. She straightened in her seat and pressed her palm lightly against the window frame, feeling the faintest hum through the metal, and then it came, the low distant tremor that sent a quick spark of recognition through her body, the unmistakable signature of fast-moving jets approaching from behind. Her heart picked up speed even as her mind stayed steady, a lifetime of training rising naturally, and she turned her head toward the dark sky outside the small oval window. At first she saw only the endless night, then two brief glints of silver light slid across the stars, tiny but perfectly distinct to her practiced eyes, and she knew immediately what they were: fighter aircraft closing in formation, their sleek silhouettes cutting through the darkness with a precision that no ordinary plane could match. She kept her gaze steady, tracking their movement as they drew closer until their outlines grew clear, the unique angular shape of F-22 Raptors unmistakable to anyone who had ever flown alongside them, and 1,000 memories surged back: the high whine of their engines, the sharp clipped radio calls, the pride and weight of flying among the very best. A small murmur rippled through the passengers as someone else finally noticed the distant lights, but most remained unaware of the true significance, and the attendants continued their service with polite smiles that faltered only slightly when they exchanged quick glances, a silent conversation that Megan did not miss. The captain's voice returned, still calm but with a subtle urgency that made Megan sit taller. "Ladies and gentlemen, we may need to hold our approach for a short while. There is nothing to be concerned about. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened." The careful repetition of reassurance only confirmed her suspicion that something unexpected was unfolding outside. As she studied the Raptors drawing a graceful arc parallel to the commercial plane, she felt an old excitement stir beneath the steady beat of her heart, the familiar readiness of a pilot facing the unknown. She thought of how many times she had been on the other side of such a scene, the one providing escort or intercept, and the memory made her breath deepen. Suddenly a soft chime rang above, and a flight attendant hurried down the aisle, her professional smile tight with controlled concern, leaning toward another crew member to whisper before quickly heading toward the cockpit phone near the galley. Megan watched closely, her senses alert to every detail: the way the attendant's hand gripped the armrest for balance, the slight tremor in her movements as the attendant picked up the phone and spoke in low urgent tones. The sound of engines outside changed again, a coordinated maneuver that only deepened Megan's certainty that the Raptors were not merely passing by. A minute later the captain's voice filled the cabin once more, this time carrying an edge that only someone with flight experience might notice: "If there is anyone on board with military aviation experience, please press the call button or identify yourself to a flight attendant." The words hung in the air like a sudden crack of thunder. Passengers exchanged confused looks, a few murmuring questions, but Megan did not hesitate. She reached up and pressed the small plastic button above her seat, the soft ping sounding louder than she expected in the quiet cabin. The nearest flight attendant was at her side almost instantly, her eyes searching Megan's face with a mix of hope and urgency. "Ma'am," she asked quickly but respectfully, "are you military?" Megan nodded with calm confidence that surprised even herself after so many years away from active duty. "United States Air Force," she said in a clear, steady voice, the words feeling both familiar and distant on her tongue. "Former fighter pilot." The attendant's eyebrows lifted slightly, and she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Could you please come with me to the front of the cabin? The captain needs to speak with you right away." Megan unbuckled her seat belt and rose smoothly, her movements precise despite the slight sway of the plane, and followed the attendant toward the cockpit door, passing rows of curious faces that turned to watch her with quiet curiosity. She could feel the subtle shift in the cabin as passengers sensed that something serious was happening, yet she kept her focus forward, each step measured and calm as years of discipline guided her. When she reached the front galley, the captain stood there waiting with a radio handset in his hand, his expression professional but tinged with unmistakable respect. "We have a military escort requesting identification of a passenger," he explained in a low voice, glancing at the radio as if even he found the situation remarkable. "They specifically asked for someone with the call sign Eagle 1. Do you know anything about that?" For a heartbeat Megan felt her breath catch. Eagle 1, her old call sign, a name she had not heard spoken aloud in years, known only to a small circle of trusted pilots and commanders. She met the captain's eyes steadily, the weight of the moment settling over her like the familiar embrace of a flight harness. "Yes," she said simply, her voice quiet but firm. "That's me." Megan stood at the front of the cabin with the low hum of the engines around her, the radio handset now warm in her hand as the captain gave her an encouraging nod, and she raised it to her ear with the steady calm that years of flying had drilled into her, saying clearly, "This is Eagle 1, the call sign she had not spoken aloud in so long that it felt both strange and perfectly natural at once, and for a heartbeat there was only the crackle of static before a firm but respectful voice came through. "Eagle 1, this is Falcon Lead, is that really you, ma'am?" The sound of the F-22 pilot's voice carried a mixture of surprise and admiration that made the captain glance at her with raised eyebrows, and Megan replied without hesitation, "Affirmative, Falcon Lead, this is Eagle 1, go ahead," her words crisp and even as if she were back on an active mission rather than standing in the aisle of a civilian jet filled with curious passengers. "Ma'am, it is an honor," the voice continued, the emotion clear even through the radio's mechanical edge. "Command sends their greetings, and we are here at their request. We just needed to confirm it was you before continuing." Megan frowned slightly, her mind already working through possibilities, wondering why a pair of Raptors had been sent to meet this flight when she had told almost no one about her travel plans, and she asked in the same calm tone, "Falcon Lead, what is the purpose of this escort?" A brief pause followed, then the pilot replied, "Today marks the anniversary of Operation Dawn Shield, ma'am, the mission you led, and Air Command wanted to make sure you arrived safely and to show their respect." The words sank into Megan's heart like a sudden shift of gravity, the mention of the mission she had carried silently for years stirring memories so vivid she almost forgot to breathe, and she gripped the edge of the counter for balance as images filled her mind, the dark expanse of a hostile sky, the tense voices of her squadron over the radio, the sharp fear of knowing lives depended on every choice she made, and the bittersweet moment when the mission ended with lives saved but her closest friend Captain Laura Price lost to a sudden mechanical failure that no one could have predicted. For so long she had tucked those memories away, speaking of them only in official reports and quiet conversations with a few trusted commanders, and now here she was, hearing strangers in the sky call her by the name that once defined her. Around her, the cabin had grown hushed as passengers realized something extraordinary was happening. People leaned into the aisle to catch a glimpse of her, their eyes wide not with fear but with curiosity and growing admiration, and even the flight attendants stood still, listening to every word. The captain watched her with a look of quiet respect, as though he had suddenly discovered that the ordinary passenger from seat 12F was someone far greater than he had imagined. Megan took a steadying breath, letting the memories settle into a calm clarity, and spoke again into the radio, "Falcon Lead, I acknowledge your message and your escort. Please extend my gratitude to command," her voice steady though her heart beat fast with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Copy that, Eagle 1, the pilot replied, the respect in his tone unmistakable. "It is our honor to fly with you tonight." Outside the window the two raptors held a perfect formation, their sleek silhouettes gleaming faintly against the starlit sky, wings tilted just enough to signal acknowledgement before returning to their precise path alongside the commercial jet, and Megan felt a surge of connection as if the years between her last mission and this moment had folded into nothing. The captain offered her the cockpit jump seat so she could watch more closely, and she accepted, settling into the small space with practiced ease while the co-pilot glanced back with an odd smile, clearly aware of who she was now. Through the wide front windows she could see the fighter jets keeping flawless pace, their navigation lights blinking in quiet rhythm, and for a moment she felt the familiar exhilaration of being part of a formation, the sense of trust and discipline that only pilots truly understood. Yet alongside the pride came a deep ache as she remembered Laura's laugh, her steady voice, and the final radio call that had cut off too soon, and Megan silently whispered her friend's name like a promise not to forget. The captain broke the gentle silence with a soft remark, "Colonel Williams, it's a privilege to have you aboard," using the rank she had once held, and Megan turned to him with a small smile, touched by the simple acknowledgement. "Thank you, Captain," she said, her words calm but her heart full. "Tonight reminds me of what we all stand for." Back in the cabin, passengers whispered excitedly to each other, parents quietly explaining to their children that the woman at the front had done something heroic even if they didn't know the details, and Megan could sense the shift in the atmosphere as respect replaced mere curiosity, a quiet recognition that someone among them had carried great responsibility. She stayed near the cockpit for a while longer, exchanging a few more clipped transmissions with Falcon Lead as the commercial jet continued its eastward course, and with each word the memories of her old life settled more comfortably inside her, no longer a burden to hide but a part of who she was. As the radio conversation drew to a close, Falcon Lead offered a final salute in words, "Eagle One, it was an honor to fly with you again. We will remain on your wing until handoff near Washington Center. Safe landing, ma'am," and Megan responded with a quiet "Thank you, Falcon Lead, safe skies to you," feeling the weight of the moment settle like a calm after a storm. When she finally handed the radio back to the captain and returned to her seat in 12F, the passengers she passed offered small respectful nods and warm smiles, and though no one spoke loudly, their eyes held a quiet admiration that needed no words. Megan sank back into her seat by the window, the steady hum of the engines wrapping around her like an old friend, and looked out at the dark sky where the faint lights of the Raptors glowed in silent escort, knowing that this night, unexpected and full of memory, would stay with her forever as proof that the bond of those who serve does not fade with time or distance, and that even after years away from the cockpit the sky still knew her name. Megan remained in seat 12F as the night stretched across the sky, the soft cabin lights dimmed so passengers could rest, but her mind stayed wide awake, replaying the voice of Falcon Lead and the words that had stirred memories she had kept buried for years, and though the engines hummed with the same steady rhythm, everything about the flight felt different now, charged with quiet meaning that only she fully understood. Through the small window she could still see the faint silhouettes of the two F-22 Raptors holding perfect formation just beyond the wingtips, their navigation lights blinking with calm precision like distant stars that had decided to travel with them, and each flash of light brought back another piece of the mission she once commanded, the night of Operation Dawn Shield when her squadron had been sent to protect a convoy under threat, the mission where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and loss, and where she had led with a confidence that came from years of training and a fierce loyalty to those who trusted her. She remembered the rush of cold air inside the cockpit, the tight grip of her gloves on the controls, and the steady voice of Captain Laura Price in her headset, a voice that had always steadied her no matter how tense the situation became, and the memory of that last exchange returned with heartbreaking clarity, Laura saying, "We've got this, Eagle One," only minutes before a sudden mechanical failure had taken her friend away forever, leaving Megan to complete the mission while carrying the weight of grief that no after-action report could ever capture. Now, as the quiet passengers around her shifted in their seats, unaware of the silent tribute unfolding in the sky outside, Megan felt the past and present merge in a way she had never expected, and though sorrow flickered in her chest like a small persistent flame, there was also a warmth she had not felt in years, a recognition that her service and Laura's sacrifice had not been forgotten. The captain had offered her the jump seat again, but she chose to stay near the window this time, wanting to experience the moment in the same place where it had begun, the place where she had first spotted the faint silver shapes against the darkness. Every few minutes she caught the eyes of nearby passengers who gave her small nods of respect or quiet smiles of understanding, as if they sensed that something larger than a routine flight was taking place, and she returned each gesture with a calm gratitude that needed no words. She thought of the Pentagon office waiting for her in the morning, the stack of reports and endless meetings that usually felt like a wall between her and the person she used to be, and for the first time she wondered if she had hidden behind that desk not just to heal but to avoid the pain of remembering, because remembering meant feeling both pride and loss in equal measure. Outside, the Raptors dipped slightly in a coordinated maneuver, their wings tilting in a motion so graceful it looked like a bow of respect, and Megan felt her breath catch as the gesture reached her like a silent message, a salute across the years and the miles that separated her from the sky she once ruled. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined Laura beside her, laughing softly the way she always did before a mission, and she whispered a quiet promise that she would never again let the memories fade into silence. When she opened her eyes, the stars beyond the Raptors seemed sharper, the night deeper, and she felt a calm strength settle inside her, as if the escort had not only honored her service but also given her permission to carry it proudly instead of hiding it away. The flight attendants moved quietly through the cabin offering water and checking on passengers, and one of them paused at Megan's row, leaning close to say in a respectful whisper, "Ma'am, the captain asked me to tell you that Washington Center has cleared a direct approach, but the Raptors will stay with us until we begin our descent." Megan thanked her with a soft smile, appreciating the courtesy, and turned back to the window where the jets maintained their steady vigil. She thought of how many young pilots might be flying those Raptors tonight, perhaps some she had trained years ago, and she hoped they knew that their presence meant more to her than any medal or ceremony ever could. Time seemed to stretch and fold as the plane crossed the final miles toward the capital, and Megan found herself reflecting not only on her years of service but also on the choices she had made afterward, the quiet life she had built, and the friendships she had let fade because she believed distance would ease the ache of memory. Yet in this moment she understood that the bonds formed in the sky were never meant to fade, that they lived on in every pilot who still watched over another, and that by accepting this truth she was not clinging to the past but honoring it. The intercom chimed softly, and the captain announced they would begin their descent in 20 minutes, his voice steady but carrying a note of reverence as he added, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been accompanied on this flight by 2 United States Air Force F-22 aircraft in a special escort. We would like to acknowledge and thank Colonel Megan Williams for her service to our country." A hush fell over the cabin, followed by a gentle ripple of applause that started with one pair of hands and quickly spread until it filled the quiet space with warm appreciation, and though Megan usually avoided public recognition, she felt no embarrassment now, only a deep humility as she inclined her head in a small gesture of thanks, her heart swelling with both pride and remembrance. Outside, the Raptors responded with another subtle dip of their wings, a final silent salute that shimmered against the dark as the city lights of Washington began to glow faintly on the horizon. Megan kept her eyes on those lights, feeling the weight of the night settle into a steady peace, and she realized that while her life on the ground would continue, A part of her would always belong to the sky, to the missions flown, to the friendships forged in high thin air, and to the quiet understanding that service leaves a mark deeper than time itself. As the plane started its gentle descent, she rested her hand against the window, a small private gesture of connection to the escort outside and to the friend she still carried in her heart, knowing that this unexpected journey had given her more than a safe flight home. It had given her the strength to remember without fear and to honor the life she once lived with the quiet dignity it deserved. The first soft shudder of descent carried through the cabin as the city lights of Washington, D.C., spread across the dark horizon like a glittering map, and Megan Williams felt the familiar shift of altitude press gently against her shoulders, a feeling she had known countless times as a pilot but now experienced from the quiet seat of a passenger, the view from her window glowing with the promise of home and memory all at once. The two F-22 Raptors that had accompanied the flight for so many miles still held their steady place off the wingtip, their navigation lights winking in quiet rhythm, a silent escort that filled her with both pride and an aching gratitude she could not fully express, and she watched them with steady eyes, knowing their presence would remain etched in her mind long after the wheels touched the runway. Inside the cabin the atmosphere had shifted to one of calm respect. The earlier applause had faded into a thoughtful silence as passengers gathered their belongings or simply looked out at the night sky, each of them aware that this journey had become something rare and meaningful, and when their eyes met hers, they offered small smiles or gentle nods, gestures that carried more weight than words. Megan returned each one with the quiet confidence of someone who understood service and sacrifice, her heart full but steady, and she thought again of her friend Laura Price, the voice she would never hear through a headset again yet felt beside her even now as if the years between them had never passed. The captain's voice came over the intercom, smooth and warm, thanking the passengers for their patience and once more acknowledging Colonel Williams for her service, his words simple but carrying a reverence that touched everyone who heard them, and Megan felt a soft warmth spread through her chest, a sense that Laura too was honored in that recognition because every mission they flew had been a shared effort, a partnership written in the sky. The plane banked gently to the left, and she caught a sweeping view of the Potomac River gleaming beneath the moonlight, the familiar landmarks of the capital slowly emerging through the haze, and for a moment she let herself remember earlier flights into the city when she had been the one guiding the controls, her hands firm on the stick, her mind clear and focused, the radio alive with clipped instructions and the thrill of responsibility. She wondered if the young pilots flying the Raptors outside might have trained in the very programs she once led, perhaps even hearing her name in their classrooms, and the thought made her smile with a quiet sense of continuity, the unbroken chain of service that linked one generation to the next. A subtle dip of the escort jets drew her attention again. They were beginning their farewell, wings tilting in a synchronized motion so graceful it felt like a salute carved into the night, and Megan raised her hand to the window in a silent response, a gesture only she and those pilots would understand. For a few heartbeats they held formation, then with a sudden burst of speed the Raptors climbed and turned, their lights streaking briefly before disappearing into the higher dark where stars glittered like scattered silver, and though the sky now looked empty, Megan felt their presence remain, a lasting imprint on the journey she would never forget. The aircraft's landing gear extended with a soft mechanical hum, and the runway lights grew brighter, a pathway of glowing pearls guiding them home, while the passengers around her fastened belts and secured bags, their earlier excitement softened into quiet reflection. Megan kept her eyes on the ground rushing closer, her pulse steady, her mind tracing the long road that had brought her here from the girl who first dreamed of flying, to the officer who led missions through dangerous skies, to the woman who carried loss and honor in equal measure, and she felt a calm acceptance settle over her like the gentle pressure of gravity itself. The wheels touched down with a smooth firm thud, a landing so perfect it almost felt like a final salute, and a ripple of applause spread once more through the cabin, not loud or showy but warm and sincere, and Megan allowed herself a small smile as she joined the quiet gratitude of the moment. As the plane taxied toward the gate, she gathered her simple bag and slipped her baseball cap back into place, feeling the weight of the evening like a story written across her heart, and when the seat belt sign clicked off and passengers began to stand, many paused to offer her quiet words. "Thank you for your service, it's an honor to meet you, safe travels, Colonel," each phrase delivered with genuine respect that needed no elaborate explanation. Megan answered each with a nod or a soft thank you, her voice steady, her eyes kind, and though she had never sought public recognition, she felt no discomfort now, only the understanding that this night had belonged not just to her but to every pilot, every crew member, every friend who had served and sacrificed. When the doors opened and the cool night air of Washington drifted in, she stepped into the jet bridge with measured calm, the familiar scent of the tarmac mixing with the memory of faraway runways and midnight missions, and she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who knows the sky will always be part of who she is. Outside the terminal window she caught one last glimpse of the distant horizon where the Raptors had vanished, and she whispered a silent farewell and a thank you that belonged to them and to Laura, the friend who had given everything. The terminal buzzed with late-night travelers and overhead announcements, but to Megan the sounds felt distant, softened by the clarity of the evening's events, and as she walked toward the exit she sensed a new balance within herself, a peace she had not expected but welcomed completely. Tomorrow she would return to her office at the Pentagon, to reports and meetings and the careful routines of daily life, yet she knew those things would feel different now, lighter somehow, because she no longer carried her past as a hidden burden but as a living part of who she was. The night sky beyond the city still shimmered with stars, and Megan felt their quiet pull, the eternal invitation of the air that had once been her home, and though she would not climb into a cockpit tonight or tomorrow, she understood that the bond between a pilot and the sky never fades, it simply waits, ready to remind her that service and sacrifice are not moments locked in time but truths that continue as long as memory endures. With her bag over her shoulder and her heart steady, Megan stepped into the cool Washington night, knowing that the escort of this flight had not only honored her service but also given her the courage to remember with pride and to move forward with grace, carrying the unbroken connection of the sky within her forever.